It is 11:39 a.m. and I will call to order the special meeting and workshop of the MISD Board of Trustees on today, May 29, 2018. Our first action item is 1A, interlocal agreement with Texas Computer Cooperative, ITCCS. Information on page 4 of our board packet. Mr. Hernandez?
Do you want me to come over here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Right there is fine. You need that table right there for setting thing down?
Perfect.
Yep, you can stand right there.
So I'm coming to recommend approval of our 2018-2019 Texas Computer Cooperative ITEX interlocal agreement. This will allow us to keep ITEX for a few months, for actually 6 months after the conversion process occurs. We are currently moving from ITEX over to Skyward for our student and data information systems. Having this inquiry-only access, along with some reporting access, will allow us to be able to go in and double-check the data and problem-solve if needed.
This is an action item. Motion by Mr. Bishop. Second by Mr. Fuller. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Voting for Tommy Bishop, Brian Murray, myself, and James Fuller. John Kennedy is absent at the moment, and so is Robert Marquez.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, but who was your second? Was it Mr. Murray? Or?
Mr. Murray? I said that.
He said Mr. Fuller.
I said what?
Mr. Fuller.
Oh, sorry.
Is that why you were looking at me, Brian?
I was like, that was really cool because I didn't see your lips move.
I learned an echo.
No. All right, my apologies on that. 1B, Delegate Chapter 41 Authority. On.
Annually, the district must submit the agreement for the purchase of attendance credits for the Chapter 41. It's been routine for the last several years. In order for us to submit the contract through TEA's electronic site, the board has to delegate authority to the superintendent. There's a motion that's required, has required language on this part, and administration recommends approval.
For the 2018-2019 school year, we delegate contractual authority to obligate the school district under Texas Education Code, TEC, paragraph 11.1511, C4 to the superintendent solely for the purpose of obligating the district under TEC Chapter 41, subchapters A and D, and the rules adopted by the Commissioner of Education as authorized under TEC 41.006. This includes approval of agreement for the purchase of attendance credits.
All right, motion by Mr. Murray, second by Mr. Bishop.
I do have a question.
Oh, sorry.
So.
Did you second it?
I'm going to.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay, so is it the superintendent or the superintendent or his designee?
It says to the superintendent.
Well, I'll second.
All right, second by Mr. Bishop. Any further discussion, questions? We don't begrudge delegating the authority. We do begrudge the necessity of having to do this at all.
Down, down.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. One of the 4 members. All right. Last action item is 1C, Chapter 41 Attendance Agreement. Ms. Moss.
This item is just the actual agreement for the purchase of attendance credits, and we have an attachment that needs signature of the board president and secretary. Administration recommends approval.
Page 8 from board packet.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Murray, second by Mr. Fuller. Questions or comments? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous among us 4. All right, now turning to the budget workshop. That information, page 11 of our board packet, along with some handouts in front of us. Mrs. Moss?
Today we're going to go through our final budget workshop for the board for the 18-19 budget planning year. And if we'll go to the agenda there, we're going to just go over the planning calendar again. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about fund balance in Chapter 41. Then we'll take a dive into our budget projection for 18-19 and what we're proposing for 18-19. And then we'll take a look at the superintendent and more priorities. On the calendar, you'll note that we have just the one remaining board meeting after today's meeting, and that is for the public hearing and proposed budget and proposed tax rate. We are going to adopt a compensation plan at that meeting, adopt the 18-19 budget, and adopt the final budget amendment for the 17-18 year. And you'll also note that under financial services passed on June the 8th, we must publish the budget and tax rate notice in the newspaper. I am speaking with MCAD and the chief appraiser. They typically do that for our district. And I think we're going to probably change that date from the 8th until the 7th, just so that we know we're in the 10-day window, and have him post that on June the 7th. Okay, so we'll move right into fund balance. And just an overview, fund balance is just a measure of the available financial resources. It's really the difference between your assets and your liabilities. A lot of people look at it as the rainy day fund like the state of Texas has. It's not a rainy day fund. It's not a savings account. And it fluctuates throughout the year. Typically, when we ask the question about fund balance, we're asking it for a snapshot in time, and it's typically the last day of the fiscal year, the end of the fiscal year. What is our fund balance? And that's just the difference between the assets and the liabilities for the district during that time. So some of the reasons for some fund balance we've got up on this slide: the timing of revenue and cash flows, and that's very important for us. Carla is actually working on a cash flow chart to start providing during our financial report monthly, and we hope to have that in process starting July 1st. Staggered state fundings. We don't get much in state revenue, but what we do get is staggered. We get it in September, October, and August, and you can see the percentages of how much money we get. So all that affects the reasoning for why we need fund balance. And state and federal grant reimbursements. We have several employees who are paid with federal dollars. We have to pay those employees, and once we pay them at the end of the month, we have to then request that money be reimbursed to the district. So that's another reason why we need fund balance in place in order to request that. Unexpected emergency situations, anything that come up, a storm or anything that affects one of our buildings, and we need to do something quickly before the cash flow can come in. That's another reason for fund balance. And currently, we don't have a specific goal or strategy, but what we're looking at currently right now is to maintain, and I think I've communicated this before, we want to maintain a fund balance of 25% or 3 months of expenditures, and that equates to $65 million for the 18-19 projection that we have. We kind of rounded it up. Actually, it's about 63 million, but we rounded it up to 65 million. So my recommendation is for the district to actually change policy, and I think it's policy CE local, to add that. My recommendation is that the finance committee probably get together and go over what you guys are wanting. Right now, this is just our strategies, nothing in policy. TEA actually recommends 2 months of operating expenses, a minimum of 2 months of operating expenses. But I think for what we do in our district, we probably need a 3 month balance. So this chart just kind of shows you with our estimate for 18-19 where the fund balance will be.
Could I ask a question real quick? Is 3 months, since we're moving the fiscal year to start July 1st, is 3 months enough? Because now we have a 6 month period basically that we start receiving tax revenues.
And that's what our cash flow chart will show us, and just looking at it so far, I think 3 months will be sufficient. Okay. And you'll see on this chart actually, Mr. Murray, where it shows where we'll go at the end of June. And again, it's just a snapshot in time, and we're estimating that at the end of June, our current estimate of our final budget, amended budget for 17-18 will put us at $75 million in fund balance, 75.8. But I guess what we need to kind of explain to you is what makes up that 75 million, why we jumped from 42 to 75, and we've looked at that data as well, and I'm gonna ask Carla if she will explain some of the items that go into that 75 million because of the fiscal year end.
Okay. The biggest piece of it really is payroll. So in a normal 12-month period, we have 12 months of payroll, but because of the 10 months, we're just having the 10 months of payroll for our regular employees, and then for our teachers, it's the 11 months, because we need to approve we need to include it for the school year. And the difference in payroll already is about almost $14 million. So that's not so it looks like we increased our fund balance by 14 million, but it's really not, because that carries over to the next school year. Other pieces of that would be utilities. The utilities we had budgeted for this year for July and August. That's going to be moving to the next fiscal year, and that's almost $2 million since the summer is our biggest month. There was a appraisal and tax collections that we pay to MCAD. That's about $500,000 for 1 quarter. And then just other miscellaneous things, like, for example, we have our copier lease agreement is for 12 months. Now we're only including a 10-month period. For insurance, that's for a 12-month period, but we're only going to be including a 10-month period. And so in total, what we've able to identify, we know, is due to fiscal year change, is about $16.5 million because of the change. Now, the additional savings, we recognize our additional savings, and you'll see it further. It has to do with Chapter 41. We initially budgeted for $42 million at the beginning of the year, but because of, mostly due to increased enrollment, we're looking at that payment to drop to $37 million, so that's about a $4.5 million savings. And then if you add what we originally already had budgeted for excess for the year, that was a little over $5 million. The other thing is what was left by campus and department budgets that were not encumbered. That's another $1.5 million. So as those are adding up,
Did you say that, please?
as of last Friday, what was not encumbered by the campus and department allocations, so they were given a certain budget, but by the end of last week, it wasn't used. That's about $1.5 million. We could give you this breakdown actually, so you'll actually have it in detail. And then also we were looking at payroll, just the budget versus what we would actually need. It looked like we'll have a savings of $3.5 million there. So we've identified about $32 million of that. So the savings plus due to the fiscal year change. And we'll give you the breakdown that we have.
So what, I know we hadn't really went to that point, but the money that we're talking about is the projected raises and for the district. Are they included in that, or are they not?
Yes, they are. They're included in our projection.
Well,
We'll talk about that a little bit later, to show you actually where our projections and what all's included from the board and superintendent priorities. But it is included in there.
for 18-19, but for 17-18, those are what we've identified would be the savings.
And so, first, the 17-18 fund balance number of 75.8,
Yes.
right? You told us that the reason for the increase were due to 2 different payroll factors, right? One is the fact that we're a 10-month fiscal year rather than 12-month.
Yes.
That was a $14 million
Yes.
difference. And then the 3.5, elaborate on that one.
It was based on what we budgeted initially and what we're forecasting what our actual payroll would have been if we were on a 12-month schedule, that would have been $3.5 million that we had budgeted in payroll that we would not have needed for a 12-month period.
Unfilled positions or?
It could be a combination of both. From what I'm told, the budget for last year was just a mirror of the budget from the previous year. So we just budgeted the same amount, and I think that we did have some reductions. So I'm going to say that payroll was likely inflated for last year's budget. And we're working with Mr. Bailey to try to get some of that variance out of budgeting on the salary side. We're looking to see exactly how many employees we budget for, exactly how many vacancies we have when we actually plug the salary number in for the budget. But a lot of that, and most of your variation is going to come on the salary side. That's where your largest part of dollars are. Even in my former district, that's where you see the difference. If you hire someone and you budget it for them at a certain level, you hire someone who comes in with less experience, normally that's a variation there. And what we're working on this next year is keeping up with that and reconciling it in September. The list of employees who we budgeted as vacancies, and then the difference in the ones we actually hired. So typically, that's where you see a lot of extra dollars on the salary side. So what our plan is to keep up with that amount so that we can inform the superintendent of what the difference is. Normally, it's a positive amount, so that once we have that information, we put it in a discretionary fund, and the board and superintendent can decide if they want to spend those dollars during the year. So that's our plan for that, but that's a big portion of why you see salaries varied like that.
I don't have a question for you related to budget. I have more of a point to Mr. Bailey. Is schools like, and I don't know all of them, I'm gonna throw out Great House that had kindergarten issues this year, where we needed another kindergarten issue, and we said we couldn't afford it because we didn't have the budget. These are the things I think we need to address in that number. And I know that's what you said we're gonna be doing, but we had some issues where we could have addressed teachers. And so I think we need to get tighter on that number, just because we start losing people because we don't address their needs. And I have a big concern on that. And I know it's standard, we're going to lose this many teachers, but I just see fallout this year from really good teachers that are leaving the district because they're being pulled through academies or charters or other things. That we should have kept those people in our district, and we should have worked our tails off to do that. And so I just want to make sure we really address that number. So going forward, that we know if we need to address it, we can do it. And I know in our budget, we added 37 positions or some number, 31 positions. So if we're adding 31, we've got numbers here, $3.5 million that we can afford back. Are we going to be in the right spot for next year?
Well, Trustee Murray, I think that in the past, in the past projection process for staffing at a higher rate at this time of year or the early spring was at a much higher. For instance, 2021 is where we were looking because of budget issues. But this year, being able to bring that number down from leadership, from the administration, Mr. Riddick, saying that 22 to 1, that helps us a long way going to K2, K3, and then trying to bring that number down. So you can't find the teachers in September, but if we can anticipate or project for those vacancies or those needed positions this time of year, the principals were at least able to start looking for the teachers earlier. So hopefully alleviating some of that problem.
And I appreciate your attention to detail. I just think that's something we probably missed in the past that we should have been a little bit.
It is. And we've done projections, I feel, better for 18-19. We may have done previously, different philosophy, whatever it might have been. But I think we're working tighter on projections with CFO and with academics and Patrick to share up. You don't want to add so many because they don't arrive and you're over. So you don't want to add too few. So if they arrive, you're well under. So trying to find a sweet spot in the middle for what that looks like. And our 22 commitment at K2, to look at what that could look like, to budget that piece in, and high school as well. So about 31 teachers between secondary and elementary as a lift, and then the 9 balanced literacy instructors as well. I think we're ahead of where we might need to be. We're not all the way there, because I guarantee academics want some more teachers. And CFO is saying, okay, well, there's only a finite number of dollars. And so now I think we've kind of swung the pendulum in a good place to get us in position to be ready to address what that looks like.
Thank you.
Staying on this same page, then what, I know we're jumping ahead, but it's on this page, 1819, are you about to tell us how it is that the projected, is that a projected fund balance number of 75.5?
Yes, it is, and it actually is going down because of the, I think it's a land purchase, but we'll point that out to you when we get to the next spreadsheet.
All right.
If that's, was that the question, why is it going down?
Well, no, not that it come down, I'm surprised it's that high, or projected to be that high, if you will, and I guess you'll tell us
Again, it's a snapshot in time, and it's at the end of June. So
the end of
fiscal
June
year.
of
Of the next
of
year.
that 18-19 year.
So as long as you're on a July 1, June 30th, that fund balance will look a little inflated every June. And some of the reasons that districts change to a new fiscal year is so that that number can be inflated, so that they look good to lenders and that type of thing. That's not why we did it. We did it to help the campuses and the staff members here to be able to get those purchases when they need it, because we identified that as a problem, early on when we got here, that they were needing to spend and the budget wasn't open until September 1. The school had already started, so that's was our main reason for moving to that fiscal year. But it will always be a little higher, you'll see in June than it is in July. And typically, because you set up receivables, so in that number you see the state of Texas will still owe us some funding for this fiscal year, but you'll see that amount in the fund balance as of June 30th as a receivable, because they owe us that money for this fiscal year. And they won't give us that money until August is the last payment that we get. So it's receivables like that that kind of inflates it. No. I wish.
But we kind of pay them in the same schedule too. We don't pay them all up front. We pay them throughout the year, so
Right.
Okay.
Any more questions on that one? So we'll talk about chapter 41. Of course, we're all, familiar with that and the challenge that, it creates for the district here. And this first slide just kind of gives you an overview of Midland ISD, and I won't go over it in great detail. We started in 13-14, and since that time, we've paid in $143 million. That's as of the end of 2017. And it gives you the average of, what our expenditures were for the last 2 years. The expenditure percentage for the 18-19 budget we're projecting is 22.5. And then you'll see our estimated MISD payments for chapter 41. That's based on some scenarios that we came up with for this budget. You see it gets as high as $80.1 million in 1920. So we'll kind of go over that a little bit later. And so this slide just kind of shows you the statewide history of recapture and how many districts were, paying in through the different time periods. And I'll note we had to look at a few times, but in 17-18, that number of districts dropped to 185. There's still about the same number identified, but the paying districts dropped to 185. And this is a list that we got from TEA that shows Midland is number 7 in the top 10 districts that recapture districts. And this is as of 16-17. Our actual audited amount for 16-17 was only 45.7, but at the time they did this document, we were at projected at 48 million for that year. So now we'll get into the 18-19 budget projections, and this slide simply shows you our assumptions and what we used to get to the numbers that we did for the budget. You have a couple of handouts that we provided for you that might be helpful and when we look at these assumptions. The first one is the state revenue template that we've mentioned to you in the past. and we utilize that to actually plug in all of our numbers. We plug in our student data. The very first page of that document shows you where we plug in the student data. If you'll reference that little section in the blue, it gives you the information that we keyed in for 17-18, and that was as of the fifth 6 weeks, the end of the fifth 6 weeks. That shows where our ADA was, and for projecting out 18-19, we added 2.5% increase to student to our ADA, and we did that across the board for 19, 20, and 21. We just stayed at 2.5% increase on the student side. On the taxable value side, which is on our chart here, the 12.5% increase, we've been back and forth in conversation with the chief appraiser at MCAD, trying to just get an idea of where he thinks we might end. He's given us so far to date 4 different estimates. We received that initial estimate on April 30th, as we reported out in the last workshop. He was looking at 4.65%. So I asked him historically to show for me in April where we were, and then in July when he certifies it, and what the difference was for the last 5 years. And we ranged anywhere from 8% to 10% increase from April to July. And so this year appears to be an anomaly as far as the boom, I'm thinking, and that's what he's hearing. MCAD actually does not do the appraisals on minerals. They have a vendor who does that for them, Pritchard and Abbott. So as I contact him, he contacts them to see kind of where they are. And the last that I heard, they were about 65% done. This is something that they haven't done in the past because our fiscal year has changed. So we're kind of asking a lot more of them this year than we have in the past. But he is, Jerry Bundick is really working with us and giving me all the information that I need in order for us to give the information to the superintendent and for us to make an informed decision on what percentage we may see. Now, we're basing it on 12.5. It could be 20%. It could be 14. It could go down to 8. So we've looked at all of those scenarios to see how it would affect us. And in visiting with Mr. Riddick, we determined that our assumption is going to be based on a 12.5% increase overall, not at just minerals, but overall. And then our tax collection rate, and Mr. Murray, I think, had a question on this over the weekend. What that 98.5% is only the percentage of our current taxes. It does not include delinquent taxes. With delinquent, we would be over right over the 100%. And then our M&O rate, of course, has been the same for the last 9 years. And then we jump to our interest and sinking rate. I know that we changed that a couple of times because of the TRE, but right now it is projected at 7 cents is what we would need to maintain in that rate. So that would be help the taxpayers a little bit. So this is an estimate. You know, let me put that disclaimer out there. We will work with Jerry Bundick and get his estimates for the next 7 days until we have to post the ad in the paper to see if it goes up or down. If it goes either way significantly, we'll send the board that information before we post it in the paper.
So is the average daily attendance, that's something that you begin tracking the first day of school and you don't complete the calculation until the last day of school?
Yes, the last day of school is what we're actually funded on. It goes up and down during the school year, but where we are on the very last day of school is how we're funded.
Oh, really? It's not the average during the year? It's
No, where we end up at the end of the school year is what is sent, and that's the number that they know.
I mean, that's
Number then.
all right, so I know we're not at the last day of school year, but what do we, based on the last one that we did, which was what, a few weeks ago?
The fifth 6 weeks, and that's what this template is based on, is where we were at the end of the fifth 6 weeks. And So we added 2.5% to that. And normally I like to do where we are at the end of the school year. Basically, if you snapshot in October, we're way up there. So I do 2.5% snapshot. During the year, we know that it trends down. And it's gonna trend down some more for the next 6 weeks.
So are we, I mean, based on the fifth 6 weeks, what is our percentage increase of this school year as of that date versus the end of school year last year?
I don't have that
I mean,
information, but
I guess my question is, are we at 2.5% over last year, or do we know?
Is the number 25,716? Based on what I'm looking at, the second column?
that's for 17-18 that you're looking at. For 18-19 projection, we're projecting 26,359 for
I'm
enrollment.
just asking the question that, for 2 weeks ago, what was the number?
I don't
You know
have,
what you said, what you put on here, what's that number?
and actually, I don't have that number for, I don't have that number for 18-19. The 25,716 and the chapter 41 data that you see there, that doesn't come into play when you calculate your state revenue. It's just simply the chapter 41, so that's different.
We can do the
Then the
math,
88.
I guess, right here,
Right,
right?
I was
It's
saying
22.9 versus
22.9.
23.6,
Yes,
whatever that is.
it was 3.3%.
It's 3%.
And so this year, this past year, it was 4.1%, I think, that we increased. But steadily, if you average it over a 5-year period, it's been around 2.5%
What was the 4% number again?
from last year to this year. 3.3.
It's what?
3.2.
3.2, as of the end of the second semester, fifth 6-week period. And do we generally go down from there historically, for the last 6 weeks?
Historically,
From the
I
time
would
that
say-
kids, so what you're looking at is enrollment versus ADA, but typically from the time that we get kids into our building and we take our snapshot in October, the number only goes down. The likelihood of picking kids up from that point of snapshot to the end of the year, your enrollment is not increasing. Your enrollment's only dropping. So we've got to think through, what do we do on sustaining what that drop would look like? And on average, it's been about year to year, a 2.5% growth from one year to the next. This one being a 3 plus. And so what she's doing is she's taking an average, the 2.5 average, and saying if we, in a 5-year period, let's just hold 2.5, even though it might be up at 3, it could get up to 4 potentially. If we use 2.5 as our average, it keeps us in a conservative mindset as we plan out budget. So the refined ADA is pre-K, only gives you half of a body of enrollment, and then that's at 95% attendance. So there are in total enrollment piece, what we're actually getting full credit for from the state.
and so at snapshot, we may see that 3%, but then by the end of the year, maybe back down to the 2.5%, which is why we're, and if for some reason it doesn't, and we maintain, say it goes to 4%, we're calculating this every 6 weeks, and we can see what the difference is. So we report out to you how much that increases revenue. And then again, that's something that's discretionary on the board's part to either put into fund balance or spend on some of the priorities that did not make it into the budget. But we'll track that every 6 weeks to see where we are in regards to students.
So we don't get into a situation where we're talking about at the Great House, or which we use with our executive director to bring that to our attention around, we need more staffing in this area, or were there tier 2 or tier 3 items that we did not put into the budget that we might now want to go after at this point?
Federal stuff.
Buses, can't remember all the tier 2 items, got been focusing on tier 1, but there were buses, there was
Health and
some
wellness.
benefits, some benefit pieces. And
Health and wellness, but I can-
Wellness.
I got it.
Yes, yep, as board and superintendent priorities. And you'll see those as we go through the budget packet.
Do you know how many persons, property owners are added to the rolls as relative to homestead exemption? And if so, how does that impact what we're talking about right now?
And I didn't hear the first part of the question, Mr.
How
Fuller.
many, do we know how many homestead exemptions are added to our list of exemptions?
And we do not have that information yet, but I have spoken to Jerry about that as well. We can get the calculation to see how much that is. When I talked to him about that, I think you and I had a conversation earlier that there's also a local exemption here, which is which is an additional 10% on top of the $15,000 homestead exemption and the additional $10,000. I think a couple of years ago, there was a window of opportunity where districts could, when the $10,000 increase came into play, the districts could, vote to no longer do the local, but we still do the local. So in addition to the $25,000 exemption, we also do a 10% addition too. And I have not calculated how much that costs the district in doing that, but it is an additional cost as well, just doing the local 10% over that. A lot of districts, stop that once the $10,000 increase is put into play.
And so we're asking the county appraisal district to do more research and more work than what they've been asked to do or present before. And so part of our questions for Darlene, that's in mind as well. How many exemptions are going to increase based on the aging population of our city? And I've seen from previous tax collectors come and present the demographics of the population of the city, so you get to get an idea of where that shift is occurring and where it's growing. And we're asking our appraisal district to come up with more data and research to help support us as we begin to make our projections going out. And it's my understanding they're finding it intriguing as well, because they've not been asked to do these things. And so they're diving into this work as well.
So they have a software that they use to calculate their appraisal cost as well. And I've been accustomed to actually getting the report from their software along with my estimates. But all I received on April 30th was a one-page spreadsheet with some numbers in it. So I asked him, I showed him, how my former district used to give it to me, and he put it in that format. He actually started to, gave me the backup from there so that I could tie out those numbers and make sure that what he's giving me in the spreadsheet is correct. And he said he was asked that same question by, I think, the new CFO in Greenwood, if he could get it in that same format. And so I showed him how I normally got it, and now they're working with us to get us the information that we need so that we can make better informed decisions and building the budget. Okay, so this shows the current overview of our proposals for the different funds that the board is required to approve. And so we don't have it in detail. I know, Mr. Murray, you wanted to see it in detail by object. Actually, Carla is working on that. Again, our system is not as user-friendly as we would like for it to be, so we're kind of having to work on Excel spreadsheets to get that data in the format that we need. So we'll get that to you as soon as we can get it in that option. But we do have, and I mentioned to you, the third handout that we have kind of gives it to you in more detail. It doesn't give it to you by object, but it gives you a little more detail on what the items actually are. So you can kind of compare it from one year to the next, and then you can look at our projection. Projection for 1920 again and 2021. We just kept a 10% increase in taxable values, and we kept that student increase at 2.5% because that's been our average. Of course, it's not, it's going to fluctuate one way or the other, but that's for budgeting purposes and forecasting purposes. Those are the numbers that we used.
Not point, the question was object code, but if we could do it by
Function,
function, either way, but just so we can compare it to this year's budget to see where the changes are.
and we
It
will,
doesn't have to be
You'll
okay.
get it by function. So you'll be able to
yes,
see
you'll
that.
get it,
Okay.
we'll give it to you in both ways, it's just gonna take us a little bit to get
So
that.
let me just step back for a second. So if you get it by function, you're okay by having it by function because previous budgets wouldn't have been done by object, and so you wouldn't see it that way. You would only see function versus function. Is that how you rather?
Yeah, just so we can compare the two, just
Okay.
apples to apples.
So that way they can stop from the work
This-
that
this
they're
was
doing,
just
they're
a
gonna have
little-
it by function.
Right, a little different from what we had before.
Right.
But if we could just compare to the two so we can see where the changes are, that would be great.
Right, and you're required by law to adopt it at the functional level, so we'll definitely have that for you, and we're working on that, currently. We'll get it to you as soon as possible, but when we, on the 18th, when you approve it, that's the format it will be in. And typically it's in that format so taxpayers can see if it's instructional, function 11, did you increase, did you decrease, and within that function.
Right,
That's what he's looking for.
Okay.
So on this overview, then, I guess you're about to go into more detail, I'm assuming that.
On the,
This-
and if you just skip ahead to the priorities, so Tony, so I can show him which ones are in there. So all of the tier 1 priorities here that you see in the light blue color, if you can tell the color there, are included in the budget.
Are included in 251 thing.
Yes.
Looking, all right, well, I'm glad to hear that. Because looking at this handout, it only listed, must be reading wrong, listed tier 1 priorities of 2.9 rather than 6.
That's in addition, the raises are in with the salary amount. All the increases are included in with salaries.
So tell me again, what is the tier 1 blue line of 2.9 reflect?
It's gonna be, if you reduce probably A, B, and C, those are the salary amounts, or A, B, C, and D. Is D in there? No, D is not in there. But A, B, and C are included under payroll, under salaries and stipends in that amount.
Okay, so it's in the 140 amount.
Yes.
Those- okay.
And the 220 below are buses, which come out of tier 1 as well.
So the,
And so then if you look at D, E, F, and G, you'll see that in the 2.9 that you're looking at there. And then the buses is gonna be down farther in a blue color under 1819 REC school bus.
okay.
And so we had already purchased 3 during the current year, so we included 2 in tier 1, and then the other 8 we left in tier 2. So those are unfunded in 1819.
The additional safety officers to police officers of 44,825, is that all in? I mean, that's the total package, or is that just salary?
That is
Just salary.
that is
Salary.
just salary. We did not include benefits on that either.
So that's not all the equipment, which she has in his budget, purchase of equipment and items. So this is just for the salary portion of where we take for 2 officers on 40 salary.
Well, I guess my question is, for the economy and the industry we live in, and even if being in Midland, it's $44,000 for a teaching officer.
So we did complete a market, when you talk about the officers, if it's competitive, that's what you're talking about, the officers.
Right.
It's within range, in comparison to surrounding school districts, all the way up past, so it is in range for.
Yeah, but what I'm looking at is where we are in Midland,
Right.
versus the economy. I mean, because if you're looking at $44,000 and they're trying to find a place that's gonna pay, you gotta pay $2,500 a month rent. I mean, are we gonna get anybody?
Can't say yes or no on that one, but I could say that there could be officers in, so this is what's been budgeted at this level, not to say that if we did not have an officer that was doing MPD right now that wanted to come over to MISD, that officer would make that switch. He's already embedded here, potentially could occur. I agree. I don't know if that salary is as competitive for the area for cost of living, but in what TASB did for us, there are positions that they look outside of just school. And so they did look at the city's officers and taking that number as well and factoring that into positions, not just at the police level, but at electrical and HVAC and plumbing to see what competitive costs were outside of the school systems. I think that's something we're taking into consideration the cost of living. And part of what we've done for our work with TASB is to think through how competitive salaries should be, so we can offset some of those cost of living issues. And this is one that I couldn't tell you what the final price should be, but I know that based on their average, this is a number that we were given by them to help us start thinking through it.
I mean, same question would go as far as our janitors, our cafeteria staff, our maintenance, transportation type.
Correct. So we worked with TASB as well to look at what could be an increase for those individual positions across the board, or across our whole system, to see what it would look like to start them at certain levels, to keep them in a competitive range. And I think we're getting better this year in regards to helping close out gaps that we've had to get people more closer to market. And that was that 100% range that TASB gave us. That means you're at market 100%. Moving positions closer to that 100%, we're going to get better this next year. So it's not about trying to get it all done in 1 year. And so it's about getting after what that could look like this year, and then going into our next budget year and getting us even closer to that 100% of market for a lot of areas. And we've done some strides to take care of what we call our CNS, which is our food service, and what we've done on SPS, our school plant services, in regards to our custodial and grounds.
And the reason why I bring that point is I just hate to see the economy we live in that the ladies and gentlemen that are out doing ground work, or even doing our janitorial, cafeteria, whatever, an increase in pay is going to be like 15 cents an hour raise. And then we come back at some point in time and ask to do a bond, and then that's going to raise their taxes up way more than the raise that they actually had, even plus for insurance. So those are things I look at way out for the people in those positions and what we're saying as far as the conversation.
And I think we're using some of that strategy. I don't think we're using some of that strategy as part of our work for those people who we're trying not just to recruit here in Midland, but those who are living here in Midland. How can we help sustain quality of life for those individuals at all levels? So thinking through our lowest level and thinking through the highest level of what that could look like to help us sustain and maintain. And I agree with you. If we were to go after something in our future that would create what we were talking through on property values, does that make an impact around that? And we're also having that conversation around healthcare. How do we provide quality healthcare benefits and sustain what that looks like for all levels of individuals, whether you're making $20,000 a year or whether you're making $100,000 a year? How do we help sustain what that could look like?
So the budget that's on, it's on this page 15. Then has, you fund all tier 1, but no tier 2 or 3.
Correct. Unless and after the first 6 weeks, we see that we have positive growth, that brings in more revenue. We can then share what that looks like and then talk through what would be the other things that we would want to fund. So like on health and wellness, that's an add-on. We have a clinic built in. This was an additional add-on on top of that
It is an add-on?
to do the clinic, yes.
Still have the clinic as it exists today.
It's about putting more amenities and services into the clinic. So one of the things that we have, which is Mr. Bailey's doing with research with our work that we've done The RFP for benefits and services and consultation is working to see, can we get more out of our clinic than what we're currently getting? And so Blue Cross Blue Shield is doing work to say, potentially so, here's what we might be able to do, and they're gonna come back with some options in front of us to see, could we have offset that $300,000 based on services that we're already getting? And we would have the upgrade without having, that we're already currently, in essence, funding, and not have to come out with more funding to get the types of upgrades that we want our clinic to provide.
Our new benefits consultant wasn't very comfortable in the way that the structure of our current clinic situation. And so they're looking to see how we can better utilize that, which would be budget impacting and beneficial to us, and savings by the way that they actually, for instance, if an employee goes into the clinic and they can't treat the particular issue, they would send them out and then for additional testing. Well, where is that additional testing going to? And so putting some structure in place will be a savings back in the school district. And our consultant feels like they're going to work with our current provider, which is Midland Health, without this $300,000 added to the budget. So we feel comfortable that we will have a better situation with our current clinic contract.
I realize we're working on the 18-19 budget, not the 19-20 budget. But we can take just a minute to, if you could elaborate on if we're projecting a 2.5% student population growth, while we're still, for purposes of a look ahead in 19-20, we're still keeping salaries and accompanying benefits flat.
And we did because if you'll notice also chapter 41 recapture goes up significantly too. So that's something we'll have to decide next year whether or not we're going to be able to do that. Again, we also are projecting a 10% increase in taxable values for that next year too. So it's really just kind of, I guess, a scenario for you. There's no, I guess.
Is it 10 or 12 and a half?
10 for next year.
For 18, 19.
12 and a half for 18, 19, but not projecting more in 19, 20.
10 is 19, 20.
More than 10, which that number could go up, but trying to keep a conservative mindset. So there's not an increase that they projected on salary in that capacity, and when we get to that stage, we most certainly will look at that as an option, but not forecasting it ahead, knowing that there's the $80 million payment that would sit down there that we've got to pay through. Now, we're also in the legislative session, so come May of 19, we might hear more around chapter 41. That could give us some impetus to think through what we could do early going into the next budget cycle, which will be right at this stage right now. If there's something that is done around it, which I think there'll be a lot of energy put towards chapter 41.
Okay. And just to not assume anything, your recommended fund balance amount was $65 million. This projects a fund balance of 75.5, and I'm assuming that it needs to be more than 65 because of the increase of some, $24 million in our chapter 41 payment for the following year, correct?
Correct.
Which takes us down to 59.
And let me just clarify, I misspoke on that. I'm looking at my template and we did change that to 12.5%. It tells you our assumptions at the very top of the template here. 2.5% for ADA and taxable value increase of 12.5. So we did leave it at 12.5 all the way out. Sorry for that.
I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I want to ask a question. The $80.9 million projection is based on last year, the 18-19 taxable value of 2, that's revenue. I don't know what the property value is, but if we're only seeing we're going to get $14 million more, how would they expect us to pay $24 million extra? I mean, I know it's a year behind, but
And such is chapter 41. There are some districts who are paying, you know, I don't know if we had it on here, but there's one district who 50% of their expenditure budget is chapter 41. So it just continues to increase. The only way we're gonna get some relief is if they change the law.
my other question, going back into tier one, the first line, line A says 2% pay increase. Our median teacher, what does 2% look like? What is that? Do we have a number? Is that $1,000?
That 2% is $1,000.
$1,000.
What we looked at for teachers. So it was done based on starting teacher pay. When you started teacher pay was $50,000, and then using $1,000 as the breakout for everybody at that point.
Okay. And so, what, we know, we cut stipends at a lot of the magnet schools that aren't gonna be full day.
We cut stipends at our 3 magnet schools. Let me give you an example. So Bowie, every school put in zero base what they need and what they want in order to operate from start to end. Bowie did have their after-school elements built into their budget, and they received it. And so stipends were cut. So 3,000 stipends were cut for coming early, and then for after school. So that ended up was a
$3,000 is what, for each employee was about $313,000.
so $3,000. So they have the after school built in. If they want to do anything after school based on extra duty pay that they would like to provide for their camps, that's across the board for any of our campuses.
Yeah, but before there was money that was, we had grants for, and that
It was grant money that we
we just
built
started
up.
having out of fund balance, right?
Yes.
It was, and we carried that over. We adjusted our calendar, so this early start wasn't necessary. Now it was the after school, and so that after school piece is built in. So in essence, they're getting 1,000 of that 3 back. Maybe that's where you might be going. And then after school, there's extra duty built in for those who are going to be doing after school work. The principal budgeted after school for that as an option. I couldn't tell you how much they would get outside of that. Our after school daily rate is
It's $20 an hour, but it's about $40 an afternoon. So for the entire time, for the entire after school program.
current though. We've changed what our average daily.
Coming up this year, starting this year, it will be $30.
$30, so it's $30. It was it fluctuated in a lot, range between $20 and $40 last year, our current school year. Going into 18-19, it's a standard $30. Whenever you do anything extra duty, $30, which is what you see.
And so that won't have any effect on what we do right at school.
No, so that would be, let's say they do a big play, one of the big things that they do at Bowie as an example.
Okay.
That right at school would be something completely separate.
And that's
This
your
would be
curricular
different.
activity, more or less.
Correct, exactly. Now, if the play performance time ended, and you still needed care, you could go do the play performance and then come back over to the right at school piece.
This is a head that I don't see it in here, but dropping the INS fund down to 7 cents. We raised it this year just to get to that. I think that the minimum fund balance we needed was $2 million in there, if I remember correctly. And so by your projection at 7 cents, we cover and add a little bit to that. So we still stay above the required minimum for what the state tells us to do.
Yes, and just as it affected the general fund balance, the fiscal year change will affect INS fund balance as well. So you'll see that increase as well.
So but that, the reason we did that was the grade or what we were seeing. So that keeps us in good space, and we're able to give the taxpayers a little bit of relief.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
And again, let me just say that's, we're still gonna receive some estimates. So as of today,
Yeah.
the 29th, it looks like 7 cents. But we will work with him for the next 7 days to see where that taxable value is, and if it fluctuates considerably one way or the other, or if that amount changes, we'll report out.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's, unless you have other questions, that's going to be our budget for today. Okay. So this was something that I don't know if you guys had seen before. This is a template that we refer to as Omar's template that is, I don't know how many cells it is, but this is where we plug in all the information that he keeps as vibrant and as updated as possible, going through the legislative sessions. If things change, every cell has a formula built into it. It goes, maybe 15 tabs, 8, well, how many?
More like
30, thank you. It's always under 30 tabs. He can help us build out what our projections could be. So this is probably the closest estimate that we can come up with in regards to having you be very confident in voting in regards to our budget going into the So this is something we want to share with you as well. We want to share with you what the notice would look like. So when the notice comes out, get an idea of what we would post in the paper as well.
I want to ask one more question. Something to think about. I was visiting with a person from Andrews a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that they actually build in a lot of their capital expenditures into bonds, into a bond request, like for buses, for instance. And I know the state may frown upon that, or maybe kind of look at a way to close that loophole. But it's something I think we need to consider, because when we pay for a bus now, or this is what we're budgeting right now, it says $220,000.
Correct.
But we're paying $269,500 because we got 22.5% of that money going to the state. We get it out of INS, we pay dollar for dollar, so we pay $220,000, so we save $49,000. And so I just think it's something we need to consider about how we buy buses or other capital items like that. When we do a bond, we may want to put something in there.
You don't want to put it on a 30-year bond.
Right, that's the only thing is in the short term.
Well, and I think Andrews is doing shorter bonds. They're rotating, but it just makes more sense to pay dollar for dollar than instead of paying $122.5% for a
And that's
bus.
typically what they would do for a bond, on like technology and buses, things like
Land.
that.
It would all go inside a short-term piece built into our bond use. So if we thought about what would be all of our technology needs, and then think we would refresh, and then what would be all our transportation needs as well for the buses. They're a high item that we can put in that goes on a short 5-year, 7-year, 10-year bond rate of years. And I think taxpayers are very comfortable with that. As long as we don't put it down to 30, we're paying $30 on a $220 item. That is double to the income.
Yeah, it just gives us the opportunity to show, hey, we're saving money, we're not using, we're not doing that wise with this tax money.
Correct. So that's something that, when we get to that point where the facilities committee comes up with their facility recommendation, then we would have our recommendations coming forward on land acquisition, transportation, technology, what would be the other needs that we have as well on top of facilities.
The only other thing I have is, I know we touched on chapter 41 and some of the history. I know, Mr. Murray, you were interested in getting into a little more detail. So I'm open, if you want to set an appointment, I can walk you through that process and give you a little more detail on chapter 41 and how it works and how the people calculates it and all that. Just let me know. I'm glad to do that.
What we are doing is really what the state refuses to do. We're funding public education, chapter 41.
I agree, and I just think if you see the numbers on the one slide, page 9, I don't know if that is not a direct relationship to how our state legislature expelled us by making the school district split the bill for stuff that they're putting now back into a general fund and not allocating to school fund financing. It's ridiculous, and I think we always want to hear about people talking about, well, we need property tax relief. Well, we can have property tax relief if they would quit dipping into our money.
Right.
And that's the issue, and that they're not, any of them willing to say that that's what they're doing. And I think that's where we need to address how we vote on what people are actually doing in Austin, as opposed to just 131 million has grown to $5.1 billion. And it's just gotten outrageous. And I appreciate the fact that you've been asked to speak in front of them and go and try to represent schools for what we're doing. But even with the fact that we have this 10% in our property tax in Midland that we give back as a exemption, we don't have any choice over that right now, the way I understand it, because we're frozen at that. We couldn't change it if we wanted to right now, because the state froze it for us. And so, I just think it's basically like stealing on a state level. And they've imposed a sales tax on us, and it's not right, so. And what could we have done with all the money that we've given to the state? Our school district wouldn't nearly look like what the shambles it's in now as far as facilities and athletics and fine arts.
Right.
And we had a great fine arts presentation the other night in our facilities planning committee. And it's ridiculous, the things that we have to do and can't do because we're giving all of our money to other places. And you see in the paper where they're building water parks for school districts. And that makes no sense. So, rant closed.
Anything else?
No, sir, I think that's it on our side. If there are questions that come up, if you have them, please don't hesitate to shoot them to us.
Well, just one question. You made comments about our clinic. Is it that we are doing a good job relative to how we function structurally? Or is it, are there specifics we need to address in order to do better?
So the first, I would say that our clinic is a big attractor for new talent that comes to the area. We have a clinic that's open up late, that teaches on kickoff work, that type of thing. However, on the backside, with the district and the agreement that the district has been under or in with Midland Health, our consultants have believed that we have not been receiving the best deal possible. And so we're going to challenge that and do what we can to make sure that that structure is in place so that it's cost effective and that we are making best use of. We already have, we pay for our employees' health insurance base coverage. And so there should be some discounts associated with that, as well as the operational costs that we have to pay as a district, for instance, mowing the lawn and that type of thing, when it's supposed to be a partnership that's had. And we've been going in looking into that.
We're finding out some new things that we just did not know that we cover, that we should be getting like services that the city might get, as well as how we handle operations of that facility.
We currently pay 75% of their operating costs.
But we don't get the 75% of the service that I think our employees should be getting. The minimal functional services where they might be able to treat them there, but it's not in our contract to be treated, so we have to then leave and go get those services somewhere else outside the clinic. Sometimes the clinic will service them, it's hit or miss, and then they're charging us for those services instead of charging the insurance towards those services, because it's easier out there to bill out the school district as opposed to go bill out the insurance company for those services provided.
We only share with the city. Who else is part of it?
Yes. Those two.
That's just us two. And the city has a higher standard of what they're getting as an offering, and we have a lower standard of what we get offered for our employees. So So if you have strep throat, minor symptoms, but I think if your symptoms go higher, then I think that's when we're not getting the kind of services that we need. We're using that as a healthcare option. We've had conversations with Midland Memorial, through what we can do. That's what this additional funding was to go and drive and support. Thus, we went out for RFP on benefits. They're sharing that there's some things that we should be able to do and drive much more efficiently. And so to see what we might be able to do to give our employees the best benefit health care and wellness that's out there, if we're going to add money to it, how can we upside it?
I definitely appreciate the work that Darla and your team has done. Because when we looked at this, when we talked about it at the last meeting, it was like, where is the tier one even going to fit into the game? And so y'all done a great job of making that work. And Mr. Bailey, the same way with your team. And it just seems that we're way more efficient about looking at what we have and how we're getting the most out of our resources. And so I appreciate all of the work all of y'all put into this.
Thank you for noticing. Appreciate that.
All right, anything further? We're adjourned at 12:50 p.m. Thank you very much.